The year is 1980. A young man leaves everything he knows in Australia in search of meaning on the other side of the world. In Paris, France, he falls in love with the language, culture, and emerging radical, what some have taken to calling postmodern, theory of the French intelligentsia. His time running out and hoping to return for a longer stay, he asks Lyotard to write him a letter of recommendation. Lyotard does him this favor, making it so that our young man is able to win a highly coveted scholarship that pays for his return to study French and live in Paris indefinitely. While there, he gains fluency in the language, takes classes from Guy Deleuze for 7 years, and sits in on lectures from other notable figures, including Michel Foucault. The young man from our story grows up to be an author, translator, and now French language tutor at Theory Underground. His name is Terence Blake, author of the Agent Swarm blog and YouTube channel. Mr. Blake has written, spoken, and translated French now for the last 40 years. About 6 years ago, Mr. Blake joined the Theory Underground platform, where he has been binging past courses and recently has begun to mentor members of the Theory Underground crew in the French language. The episode you're about to see or hear is from when Dave and Nance interviewed Terence to get to know him better and share some of his amazing experiences with everyone. I hope you will listen to it through to the end, give it a like, and if you also want to binge past courses, get involved with the French Club at Theory Underground, or just support in some way, stick around until the end of this video for more information. All right, well, welcome to Theory Underground. How are you doing, Terence?
Hello, Dave and Nance. I'm doing fine. I'm really getting into the Heidegger and Žižek and Jaspers and Zupančič courses, and exploding my mind with that. I'm in a strange moment in my life. Of course, I live in France. I was born in Australia. I came to France because I managed to get hold of a very rare scholarship, French government scholarship. There are only 3 or 4 a year for Australia, and they weren't intended for philosophy students, but for French literature students. So in 1981, I got this scholarship, and I was totally into Deleuze at that time. So I still very influenced by Deleuze, but I've been evolving and going into a sort of desire to sort of deconstruct and upgrade my brain. And I fell onto your courses exactly at the right moment for that.
That's amazing. Thank you. And not only have you, I noticed when you had first joined the Theory Underground platform, and I reached out to you because I recognized you from your work with Agent Swarm, and I was looking into your YouTube channel by the same name, and right around that time you started doing these translations of the work by Slavoj Žižek. Could you talk about that maybe a little bit?
Yes. One moment, I've got it here. It's called À travers le réel, across the real. Or, I mean, you can play with the translation, and it's à travers is a preposition, so it means across, but you could translate it as traversing the real. It's the best series of interviews that I've seen by Žižek, and I can't understand why it hasn't been translated. It came out in 2010. He's interviewed by a guy from Fabien Tavi, who really knows his Badu, has written on Badu and done an interview, a book of interviews with Badu that has been translated, and knows his Lacan well. So he really goes to the essential, and Žižek really goes to the essential with him as well. And he says things more clearly, more explicitly. Sometimes you can sort of feel implied in his works in English, but he really says a lot of things that you can't find elsewhere. I was really interested because I don't like having to choose between Deleuze and Žižek, for example. I don't think they're the same, but I don't think they're totally opposed either. If you go to a high enough meta level, they can work together, and sometimes Žižek is working at that high enough meta level. For example, in the introduction to the second edition of Organs Without Bodies, where he takes on Deleuze, I didn't like some of the stuff in that, but the closest he came to dialectical contradictory reconciliation with Deleuze in English was in the introduction to the second edition, and he talks about the necessity for Lacan Deleuze alliance based on the real, which many people don't realize that's an important category in Anti-Oedipus and later. So I got excited about this book. I read it when it came out in 2010, and I started. Most of my YouTube channel is devoted to exegetical readings, where although I just read a text in English, but that's the exception. I translate stuff in French, and I retranslate it with my knowledge of the French language, because I've been living here for 40 years and reading the philosophy and talking about the philosophy here in French. And I retranslate the incipit, the first few paragraphs of well-known texts, and I comment my translation and why, if it's the case that I'm not happy with the translation that is officially produced in English, because lots of the translators are not philosophically sophisticated enough for me. So it's, in a sense, the translations are correct from a literary point of view, but they miss all sorts of conceptual things. And there are things in French that you can't capture in English unless you translate it in several different ways at once. And it's even difficult to put that in a footnote. So that's why I stick to the incipit, and I can do all the different translations that would be necessary, and where they're good and where they're bad. So whenever I can, if there's a book that hasn't been well understood, it's been badly translated, or in this case, the Žižek book is not translated, I translated the first few chapters of Badu's third volume of Being an Event, when it hadn't been translated into English. Now it has. So it was a scoop, but as I'm not in the official academy or the good books of the pseudo para academics, that was just for my pleasure. It didn't. It was a scoop, but very few people picked up on it. So for the moment, I've gone on hold for my translating and commenting this, but there's at least one further chapter that I want to do, which is called Hegel in the Mirror. And so he talks about his ideas on Hegel. So I want to do that one as well. So I'll probably break it up into smaller pieces, because I think an hour of me umming and ahhing about different possible translations of words is probably unbearable, even sped up. So I'll try and do the next chapter in smaller portions.
That the thing is with bigger, more in-depth stuff like that, it might be unbearable for the random person who clicks onto it. But with someone like me, and there's a lot of people like us here at Theory Underground, if we're not going hard into it right now, but we got into it a little bit, then what I did, at least, was I bookmarked it as, this is where I want to dive in next time I'm thinking about Žižek and French translation, and especially these questions of the English translations. I think that you're getting at something really important here that is worth dwelling on for a moment, and that is the fact that it's not philosophers who are translating continental philosophy most of the time. It's people who are in the world languages departments of universities. And so a lot of people that I meet, even Carl, who teaches us Spanish, he got into philosophy through the work of learning French literature, right? And so then he started reading Sartre. So you get a lot of people who come to continental philosophy because they're interested in the language first, philosophy second, and or then the consumers of it are often doing literary criticism, right? And so in the world of philosophy, Žižek's kind of this sort of pariah, and then people say, oh, he's not rigorous. And of course, to the American audience, he's often speaking in a pretty accessible way, and he kind of will go with jokes and stuff like that. But am I correct then in understanding that you were saying that when he's speaking in French, especially in these interviews here, he's got no problem going in depth and technical and getting down to the nitty gritty?
Oh, he's directly into his own universe. He's not. He's speaking straight away out of that. He's not easing us into it. He's just saying things how they look to him. We have to remember. I can't tell exactly how long he was in France. Unlike me, he could go back and forth, but he was, because his country is closer than Australia is. But I think at least 4 years he was studying for 4 or 5 years. He did his doctorate in French. He did his analysis with Jacquard and Miller in French. So he totally masters the French language up to the philosophical level.
Yeah, that's one of the amazing things that I think is lost on a lot of Americans who don't appreciate multilingualism. You know, they don't have that healthy appreciation because they didn't get the education. And so I'll want to return to the topic of multilingualism and the French collaborations we are talking about doing together. But first I want to start to go back to some of the biographical, anecdotal stuff, because that's very fascinating. Like the fact that you met some of these people we studied. But really quick, I see something over your shoulder there, and I wanted to. Oh, I see another thing I reckon. Okay, what do you have there?
Okay, probably the shelf that you're looking at is third from the top. I've got theory, underground theory, Timenergy, Žižek's For They Know Not What They Do. I was really impressed by the course given by Mikey on that. I thought I came to France for the first time. I was on an Australian scholarship, so I came for 6 months in 1980, and my experience had been in Sydney in a department of philosophy that taught Marx and Althusser and Foucault and Lacan, particularly taught by the feminists. And it was the early two phases of Lacan, from the mirror stage phase and the symbolic stage. And they hadn't really caught up with the Lacan of the real. And I was looking for something that was French and abstract and Marxist and psychoanalytic and that would go beyond all that. And I discovered Anti-Oedipus, and I fell in love with that. But from following Mikey's course on Žižek, I think that if the Lacan, the later Lacan of the real, had been presented to me, I wouldn't have needed to go to France and evolve from Deleuze to Žižek, but not renouncing Deleuze. So anyhow, and then there's Zupančič, What is Sex? I'm following that course as well. That's, once again, I think Cadell laughs when he talks about that. I followed before his videos on his YouTube channel, now called Philosophy Portal, and they're incredibly dense and intense, the ones on Zupančič. And I think the first one, which is only on the general introduction to the series of books by Žižek called Short Circuits, and the introduction, Cadell's presentation of that is incredibly intense, and the idea that you short circuit everything, that you detach from everything, you explode the machine, and you plunge into a lostness and an anxiety. That was, for me, the perfect statement of the state of mind that I've been going through, and I go through quite regularly. Anyhow, so the Zupančič is really good, the book and the course.
You've got...
I find I'm moving away from my microphone. What I find interesting about you and your contributions to this course and your own classes is that both Mikey and Cadell are sort of hardliners. They're intense and dense. And I would say it's not exactly a monistic way of thinking, but you add an element of yes, oh, that's good, that's great. But you add an element of pluralism that in the style, not just in what you say, but in your approach to the concepts, that for the moment they're so concentrated on what they're doing that they can't sort of pluralize it out. And you do that quite well. So when you and Cadell and you and Mikey are together, it helps avoid the risk of a sort of dogma crystallizing out. So I won't say anything about dance for the moment, but he sort of he's more a crazy Tai Chi master, I would say, in the intellectual interactions. So anyhow, so that makes it more not just more plural, but more fluid, more watery. I don't know. That makes it more wavy. Under that, I've got well, I will show and then I'll say I've got Being in Motion by
Marx in Motion.
Snail. That's interesting. I think he's basically a Deleuzean in denial, and everything he says that he contributes, like the idea that it's Klineman all the way down, is already there in Deleuze, but he just doesn't like to be covering stuff. And that means he can concentrate on that and do all sorts of historical and mythological enrichments. But I don't see it as revolutionizing Deleuze's ideas. There's Being in Time. I'm following your classes on that, and I must say I really like your take on your whole approach to Heidegger's Being in Time. And there in the Heidegger, I think it's the Heidegger first class, or is it in the stream? You basically you do what I said for I know it's in the public one, Heidegger and Traditional Philosophy of Science. You go through all the different crises, and not just the scientific crisis in foundations, and you manage to put the mind or the spirit or the brain in crisis as well when you talk about Heidegger. So and you put Dreyfus and in his place, well, in the sense you situate him, but you put him in his place quite well. And after that, I've got what have I got? I've got the Écrit by Lacan. That I've got it in the big edition. I've also got it in 2 little paperbacks. Most of these Lacan, Foucault, and so on, you can buy in little paperback cheap editions. That's part of the French sort of ordinary culture. For those who've been through high school, in the last year of high school, they do philosophy, so they read a little of these things, and that's the well-educated public, or the undergraduates in French universities have cheap and easy access to those thinkers. And the last one is a book from the seminars of Badu. I think all his seminars have been published now, and so in the build-up to Being an Event, which was published in French in 1986, he did a full seminar on Heidegger, where he doesn't do what you do. He does something else. He takes on Heidegger as an equal. So he goes through why it doesn't agree with Heidegger on what being is. He doesn't agree with Heidegger that thought is a question, because you have to wonder, but you have to find. He doesn't agree with Heidegger on what is truth, and there are 4 different types of truth, and so on and so on. So it's a brilliant book. I mean, it's one of the best books on Heidegger, but it won't tell you exactly what Heidegger says. Many people find that it's a bad guide to Heidegger, but I think it's brilliant because it's his really dense, conceptual and poetic at the same time style, and he's talking to Heidegger as an equal, which who does that today? Dreyfus never did that. Dreyfus talked to Heidegger's knee or something, but Badu is a big, strong guy, talks to Heidegger face to face.
I'm definitely not ready to do that yet. It's goals, eventually I'd like to be able to do that. But for now, I'm like, we have to get Being in Time right before we can do such things. And, my whole project is just to show that the scholarship on Being in Time has been, either find the hidden Nazi behind every sentence so you can dismiss him, or, whitewash his political inclinations entirely from that decade and act like it was all just some anomaly that came later. Like, oh, this just magically happened in 1933. It's not like Being in Time led to that or anything. And I think we have to be more realistic than that. Being in Time does set the stage for joining the Nazis in 1933, but it could also set the stage to become more like Alain Badu. It's ultimately, I think they both agree that you're not a full human in a sort of sense. We'll say that loosely, but you're not really full if you're not part of a project, fidelity to something bigger than just yourself. It's just that one is more forward looking. The other one's, we would say, probably more backward looking. But this is the week where I'm doing the chapter 5 of Division 2, which is where that reading really all comes together. The heritage and tradition, and it's where it sets the stage for patriotism and everything else like that. Because just reading Division 2, you read chapters 1, 2, and 3. It's all about being unto death individualizes you, removes you from the they. It's easy to read that like Sartrean, like as some kind of radical existentialist individualist project, but he's setting the stage to get to chapter 5. That's where it all comes together. But my work's really cut out for me. There's a lot of stuff I have to do this week.
Well, nobody's really done that. It used to make me angry even 40 years ago. I couldn't understand why every book on Heidegger didn't begin with 50 pages of examination of his Nazism, and why nonetheless they could write a positive book on him. And there's this, it's easy to see in France because France is so small. There's this sort of mafia of Heideggerians that got hold of the books and the right interpretation. And I saw signs of it. I can't remember when. I saw it with Derrida, that Bourdieu's book was being on the political ontology of Heidegger had come out, and Derrida said in so many words, it's written down, but I saw it a few decades ago. He advised Bourdieu to stop talking about Heidegger because they had done a seminar together, and Bourdieu had seen that it's sort of crazy. He'd seen Derrida's power of deconstructing and destroying someone. So the idea was pretty clear. Stop talking about Heidegger like that, or I'll deconstruct you like I've deconstructed all those others. So that's where you see it explicitly. But that was the attitude of lots of Heideggerians. In France, there's two main translations of Being in Time. One by a guy called Martineau was not validated by the Heideggerians, and another one which is almost unreadable, which was officially published by a guy called Fedier. And Martineau decided he would just publish his translation on internet. He made it readily available in PDF. And it's 1,000 times better than the Ferrier one, because the Ferrier one tries to make French talk like German when the logics are totally different. So that creates crazy concatenations of adjectives and nouns and verbs transformed into other things. So I think the same thing must have been going on in English, but I saw sort of very clear examples of it in France.
Yeah, I look forward to once I've once I take on the Being in Time translation project. The goal will be to translate a section and then compare my translation to the McKerracher and Robinson on the one side and the Joan Robinson on the other side. Those are the two English translations. And they kind of just do that through the whole book. And then I'll be able to write about the comparison between those two texts and how I think those translations have influenced this sort of American whitewashing approach to this text, right? Here's an example of the whitewashing. And I can't say how much this sticks with Joan Robinson because I haven't actually I'm not as familiar with her work. I have read passages, but with McKerracher and Robinson, this is my third reading of that translation. And almost every reference to rootedness or soil has been replaced by some terminology that takes out that metaphor altogether. So whenever he says whatever in this translation it says freewheeling, that's uprooted, right? So when you're in the they and everything's freewheeling, of course you could kind of surmise that means it doesn't have a basis. No, but he's also saying it's uprooted. And so it's like, well, that's fine. This is a metaphor that thinkers use. Yes, but, if we're thinking about his historical situation.
A key metaphor to his whole conceptual problematics. You
exactly
replace it by freewheeling and you get a sort of fuzzy feeling for what he's on about, but you don't see the systematicity and you don't see the possible appropriations in Nazi ideology.
Exactly.
Or derivations from it as well. So what you're doing, I think, is really important because either you get the sort of liberal softening out, the softening of Heidegger, or you get the Marxist sort of crystallizing him into some hard, dark crystal that you have to smash. So you manage to hold the two contradictory visions at the same time. And I think that some people, I really like that. Some people just gave up. So I think even Deleuze, difference and repetition, is being in time in the very title. But there was a moment when either you belonged to the Heidegger mafia or you were seen as to having Nazi affiliations. And so I think he just gave up. He talked positively about Heidegger, a Heideggerian concept, the open, in the cinema books. I was impressed in the class that he basically everything around Bergson, but he used concepts from Heidegger from time to time, and he didn't need to hide it or to have this sort of incredible protective apparatus around. But I think he didn't think the struggle was worth the effort at the time he wrote his books. And I think also he was blind in a similar way to the way he was blind about Hegel. All Deleuze knew was the Kojève and Hippolyte. In the book Dialogues, he says he had a teacher, I think it's Hippolyte, who would rap out on the table synthesis, the thesis, antithesis, synthesis. And he just stuck with that interpretation. And so for a long time, that sort of discouraged me from really going into Hegel. At the same time, I wasn't happy with that effect on me. And I was looking for philosophers that could be influenced by Deleuze and by Heidegger. And for a long time, I found Bernard Stiegler was really good on that. He began with a thesis on Heidegger and techniques, and he was mainly influenced by Derrida at that time. And he evolved, and the Derridians always say stupid stuff about Deleuze. The latest, I think you quoted Malabou saying, we should just be like bumblebees, when that's crazy. That's the bumblebee and the orchid is the same concept as a short circuit in the Žižek series, and it's about being it has an epistemological level of a parallel evolution that's maintaining the contradiction like you're doing, and she should know better, and she probably does, but because she's a Derridian at the origins, she says silly stuff like that. Sorry.
Oh, so I just wanted to make sure we're talking about the right person. So it was Malibu who said that, because I heard Catherine Liu say this. Okay, I heard Catherine Liu say the exact same thing on a panel with Platypus beside Chris Cotrone.
I don't know if I was taking you your word or Cadell's word for that in one of the videos on introductory videos on what is sex.
Okay, so maybe I misspoke. So I'm glad we stopped, because I don't think it was Malibu. I think it was Catherine Liu.
I was quite surprised.
Yeah, no, I might have slipped. But no, it was Catherine. It was Catherine Liu who has said, she's the author of Virtue Hoarders, and in that book she kind of takes her shots at postmodernists, and which I agree with her arguments against postmodernists as far as it goes, which is that it's very convenient for people who live in a world of all they do is navigate networks of power within bureaucratic institutions, and words for them really are just power maneuvering and ways of associating, and they are kind of freewheeling. And so she's basically saying that Foucault and Baudrillard are kind of just symptomatic of the PMC. I would say that they are better at diagnosing the PMC, but then they might be convenient for certain people in certain departments to use in a sort of self-serving way, but Catherine Liu, she just takes her gloves right off and she just goes to town. And when she was making fun of Deleuze, she did say that, they gave up on class politics. They just think we should all become bumblebees. Yeah, she did say that. Yeah.
Well, that means, I don't know. I will moderate myself. But
yeah, no, it's okay. It's okay.
Not really getting all the nuances of French thought in general, because is she the one that was on a Daniel Tutt interview and said, "Oh, we just have to be eggs"? Sounds like
yes, same woman. Yes.
Well,
yeah.
I almost did a video of reaction to that, but I thought it's not worth the trouble. It's just crazy. It's just not seeing the concepts behind the words, and you can do that to anyone if you really tried. You just take a philosopher, dumb his or her work down to be just words, and a lot of those words will make silly, stupid sentences once you've deconcepted them. It's a thing on my blog I've sort of fought against over again, that is, you call it stultification. it's deconcepting. You just take stuff and you deconcept it, either to make fun of it and get rid of it, or even worse, to become superficial with a sort of high-powered intellectual justification, because you've taken out all the concepts and you can exchange words as tokens and pretend you've invented your own philosophy, maybe. So probably when she concentrates on her own stuff, she uses her own concepts, and it's deep. But everybody has structural blindnesses, so they don't see the concepts in the others.
There you go. There you go. And I don't, I was going to say, you don't have to moderate yourself. It's okay. She doesn't hold back. You shouldn't hold back. Everyone can just say what they feel, and it's okay. I'll come in and clean up afterwards, and it'll be okay. Because she's a wonderful woman. We respect her immensely. She is good at what she's good at. And when she starts critiquing these guys, she's correct insofar as she's critiquing their acolytes, which is exactly the same thing.
Yeah, their acolytes, exactly.
Which is exactly the same thing with all of these mafia groups, as you would say in France. Like these gatekeepers who are acolytes. Of course, Deleuze didn't like Hegel because of the Hegelians. Of course, they were all post-Marxists because of the Marxists, and you just go down the line. And so, if you're rubbing shoulder. That's my thing, is whenever we read these guys and they have a really bad interpretation of a thinker, it's probably good to remember it's probably not that thinker. It's probably they are referring to the acolytes. And this is just the French game. This is how they played it.
Well, sometimes you have to be deconcepting the others. Otherwise, you'll be just reading everything and never do your own thing. One thing I can't stand is from the very first paragraph of Anti-Oedipus, people say, it's all about flows. The very first, I think it's the very first sentence, it's cuts and flows. And Deleuze and Guattari are quite cutting. They're constantly cutting and making flow differently. And you can see that in the way they think. So if you don't get that, you're missing even how they construct their books. So the famous interview between Foucault and Deleuze on the intellectuals is where they talk about how a class analysis is absolutely essential, and how they presuppose it. And there's something that the class analysis misses out on, and that's we don't follow just our interests, but go against our interests, and that's desire for Deleuze, which doesn't even mean desire for the way Lacan does. Desire for Deleuze is desire and jouissance, according to the regime. And Foucault says it's bodies and their pleasures. And pleasure is not pleasure in the sense of pleasure, the way Foucault uses it, is close to death drive. So people get hung up on the words, and he's not using my words in the right way, so he's wrong, without looking for a different concept behind it. And that's a tough thing to get around because it takes time.
Nance, that activity, what do you want to say about that?
It always kind of does come back to this hermeneutic, this like the fact that we are where we are, and we have to hold ourselves to account to get outside of our own perspective, or attempt to get outside of our own perspective, or at least account for our own perspective. And I'm really excited about kind of digging deep into kind of hermeneutics itself. But just recently we had a conversation where I think it was a good conversation. I think it was worth having, but for 45 minutes, it was just the same thing, like interpretation. And we couldn't really get past that issue. And it's frustrating. And I think like on the back end of it, it is easy to see like, oh, that was the issue. It was interpretation. It was position. It was commitment, this and that. But when you're in the moment, when you're doing the thinking, it's hard to see it when you're doing it yourself. And I think a large part of what is going on here is trying to build trustworthy circles where we can kind of hold each other to account, and we can catch ourselves or catch each other because we all do it. We all get caught in our own. We all start huffing our own farts.
Thank you, Tai Chi Master Nance.
I agree with that. I got a good example with Deleuze. When I came to France in 1980, I went to Deleuze's classes. They were that was the year before he turned to cinema, so it was on A Thousand Plateaus type stuff. Then I went up to talk to him at the end, and he stayed around at the end and talked to me for a while with a few acolytes. And I asked him, I told him I had a philosophy magazine. It was a university magazine run by me and a few friends. And I'd like an interview with him. And he just looked really wily and spoke, no interviews. And he said, but I'll give you something. What would you like it on? And I said, on epistemology. And he looked, it was very theatrical, looked very surprised. Epistemology? I don't do anything on epistemology. Do I? I don't do epistemology. And his acolyte said, no, Gilles, you don't do that. And for me, all this stuff on the image of thought, which is a key chapter already in the Nietzsche book, and another key chapter even more developed in difference and repetition, and is the whole all through Rhizome, which was published first as a separate book before A Thousand Plateaus. So that was published in 1975 or 6. So I was sort of desperate to hold on to something. I said, but Rhizome. And he said, oh, that was an exception. Well, I've got something for you, with a big smile. And then the next week, he gave me an extract from A Thousand Plateaus that hadn't been published yet. So A Thousand Plateaus came out just a few months after. So it was a scoop, but it was on weaving. And I was happy. I brought that back to Australia and tried to get it published, and nobody cared about it at all. But that's the problem with academia and its associated apparatuses like publishing. No one wanted to touch it. But it was just this misunderstanding. Epistemology in French doesn't mean what we mean by it. So he said, no, I don't do that. When if you know Popper, Kuhn, and Feyerabend and Lacoutage, that's image of thought stuff. And epistemology in French is taking one science and commenting in detail on the historical evolution of one concept from the 80s to the 90s to the 20th century. So in that sense, he doesn't do epistemology. So we were talking across purposes. This was the conversation of my life, but we didn't understand each other because of this cultural difference over one word.
Right. Which is why I've almost always taken up this position of saying, and so what do you mean by that word? Or how are you using that word? Or, oh, well, and I'm using this word this way. And then that tends to take care of a lot of these issues. But I was going to try to say there that, we'll publish it. You know, if you ever want to publish it still.
Well, it's been published. It's a part of A Thousand Plateaus. But
that's
when I
true,
got it, A Thousand Plateaus hadn't been published in French even. So it was a scoop.
Dang, missed opportunity.
Missed opportunity. So, but it didn't daunt me from coming back and staying for 7 years in Paris, and then moving to Nice.
Well, so that's where I wanted to take this, is to this sort of the biographical and anecdotal. I just, maybe in our last 15 minutes here, I would love to get a little into some of the what they call the tea nowadays, which is really just the gossip or the drama. There's things that one hears, but I, having not read a lot of the biographies and stuff like that, I don't really know. It's kind of like the rumor mill that I'm in, but I kind of want to start out with Deleuze and what Deleuze was like, what taking courses from him was like, what he was like as a personality, as a professor. And also, I'll just preface it with the biggest question on my mind right now. Did Badu really try to cancel Deleuze? Did he come storming into classrooms yelling, accusing Deleuze of being a fascist for doing metaphysics with his students?
This was before my time there, but yes, he did that in the movement around 1968. There was a time when Badu rejected philosophy and was mainly into militantism. And I remember reading somewhere by Badu himself how Deleuze, who had been offended by that, had always been nice with him, and when he published, when Badu published Theory of the Subject, wrote him a letter saying how much he appreciated it, even if it was not at all what the sort of thing that Deleuze wrote, and that apparently Deleuze had talked about his sadness that there was a form of intellectual suicide in Badu's choice. But Badu bounced back from that. I think he said that he was invited by Lyotard to some sort of conference, and that was him being reintegrated into the mini big other of big philosophers. Deleuze, it's hard to say. I just went to a class by him, and I just loved everything. I thought this is the first time I'm going to a real philosophy class. I'd already been studying philosophy for 8 years in university courses. But for me, that was just pure philosophy. He did his thing very simply. The recordings are all available on the Deleuze site at Purdue University. But it's different when you're going there week by week and it's new stuff coming out all the time, as it was in I went to classes from 1980 to 1986, so roughly 7 years. And it was just new stuff all the time. So it was quite poetic and conceptual. He didn't really answer many questions. Occasionally he stopped and would take questions. But sometimes people said seemingly incomprehensible or almost crazy stuff, and he would find a way of responding, finding something in it that he could respond to. There was a schizophrenic guy that he knew from Laborde, I think, who would come occasionally, and they would tutoir. They would use the familiar form between each other. He'd sit up front. I remember in the seminars, suddenly, once the guy Deleuze was trying to find exactly the right word, and the guy said, "You should relax," and Deleuze said, "No, quite the opposite." And this same guy another time got up in the middle of a class, fairly noisily, and said goodbye, and sort of started going. And so this was the cinema seminar, and Deleuze said, yes, this is a really important question in the horror film, in particular vampire films, how to leave a group without calling attention to yourself." And but it was in complicity. It wasn't putting him down or anything. So I thought that was quite good. Occasionally, if he couldn't see any point to the question, he would just say, that's your project. You're going to have to work on it. I have nothing to say on that point. So he didn't dither. He was quite clear, so he could cut as well as flow.
How long were the sessions?
I would say, from memory, 3 or 4 hours with a break in the middle. Quite packed. Over 100 people sometimes.
Were these weekly?
Weekly, yes.
Yeah. That's my favorite kind of class model, is like the longer, it's a 3 to 4 hour. I think it's the ideal. And I'm on campus right now at the local university. It's a state university, and I'm working part-time as an adjunct there and part-time at Amazon. So I kind of get to compare these two institutions. And at the state university, I am basically a discussion leader, but it's a way of replacing 3 full-time professors with 15 adjuncts. Like, that's kind of the model that they're using, so that they don't have to pay healthcare or entertain tenure track. And so what they're doing is they have the students meet in a group of 100. A professor speaks to them for 50 minutes in the group of 100. And then later in the week, they meet up in a group of 25, and that's where I have them. And so I've got 2 of these groups of 25, and my wife, she has the other 2 groups of 25. And those are also 15 minutes. You can't do anything in 15 minutes. The plenary session, when there's the 100 students there, you can't really get into anything. By the time they've settled in, they're packing up to go. Same thing with the discussion groups. It's like by the time they're warming up into the room, then they've got to go. And so, it's part of, I think, the death of this kind of thing that you got to, be a part of, which is real class sessions.
Yes. I taught in a French senior high school. I taught English. And as you said, coming in and settling down, and the classes were 50 minutes, and then packing up and already preempting the ringing of the bell. That reduced the content to very little, and it made the hour more sort of a ritual that everyone went through for unclear reasons, and then had a ritual exam at the end. So I always try to find ways of working around the constraints and getting something done for those who wanted to do something. But it's, even if you had people who could suddenly sort of turn on their brain, just be there and be totally concentrated without no warm-up, no sort of motivation of why this time is interesting or important. 50 minutes is pretty short, unless you're sort of exhausting yourself and them for the rest of the day.
Yeah. Well, and
I
it's
always
funny
tell my
because
pupils, you think I'm meant to teach you something, but a class should transform you in some way. At the end of each class, you should ask, how have I been transformed?
Yeah.
Sorry, I cut you off.
I was going to say, this is one of the only disadvantages to the Epic Marathon live streams is that they are 50-minute segments, but they're supposed to be kind of a check-in or a quick introduction, with the promise of more later, or the hope of more later, because I do prefer like the 2-hour interview, like let's get into it. But in our closeout here, I wanted to turn it over to Nance real quick, see if you had any specific questions. I mean, we didn't even get into Foucault, but we can kind of come back to a lot of this stuff later. But yeah, Nance, do you have anything that has come up for you in this conversation, or any questions that you had lingering?
I think I'm very much looking forward to your input on what's going on, what we're trying to do with being multilingual and doing translating. The focus on like interpretation, and kind of your own personal presuppositions and stuff like that. I'm very much looking forward to it. I do think you're very impressive, and I am very flattered that I don't know, just to be able to interact with you and as like, hey, I like what you're doing, and clearly, or at least apparently, it seems like you think something here is worthwhile, and that to me is very impressive. And yeah, all the fun questions, biographical stuff, I think that'd be really cool to sit down and talk about too. But yeah, ultimately, I think it is just like, I am very much looking forward to you amping up our attempts at being multilingual, and our focus on interpretation and doing hermeneutics and stuff like that. I think you're a person who can bring some expertise to the table.
Well, I only know English and French. I've tried to teach myself German, but that's already enough of an experience that it's not exactly a linguistic relativity in the stupid sense that linguists think they think they've refuted, because the Inuit saw 9 different sorts of snow and we didn't, supposedly, and they just laugh and say that's linguistic relativity. We've refuted that. But in fact, when you look at something in 2 different languages, it's not the same. And I think it teaches you to see that your own language is sort of multilingual, like some philosophy in English. I remember reading Richard Rorty in French. And Richard Rorty tries to write in a really simple, well, what he thinks is simple, but it's already difficult enough, non-conceptual type style. And I read it in French, and I thought, now they've put a word on every concept, a conceptual word, and it's 10 times clearer in French than it is in English. And at the same time, things that I read in French, when I that were thought out in French, when I read them in English, became simpler and closer to more concrete application. And then after a time, I thought, I'm sort of getting the 2 ways of seeing more directly in English all by itself. So it's good to see that and to condition yourself to absorbing other ways of seeing. And it's good that there's Deleuze calls it re-injection. He talks about it that in terms of Deleuze does say we have to be multilingual, and as well multilingual in just one language. But he talks about re-injection in relation to abstract art, that you go all abstract, and then you incorporate what you've learned from abstraction back into ordinary art or writing or filming. And I think that's an even greater benefit that you can get from learning a different language, enough to get the feel of it and how that changes your vision of your own language.
Well, the multilingualism sessions that we started doing as an experiment back when I didn't have to work for a few months there, which was a really special time for me, obviously. It was a very productive time as well. That's when I was able to publish both of these books, was with those few months of not working. And that's when Nance and we started doing these multilingualism sessions. He was already learning French. I was already learning, I had been learning German and recently had been focused on Spanish, thanks to our tutor, Carl. And I was like, well, what if we just practice with like a live event model where people at Theory Underground are welcome to come, and we say, look, the idea is that you're not expected to know anything about the language. You don't even have to have the goal of learning the language. The first goal is just to get out of your comfort zone, defamiliarize yourself, practice making sounds with your voice, and so, Nance kind of took on that attitude with Spanish and German, and I took on that attitude with French. And at this point, I think that we're pretty excited to be multilingual. We actually want to go further with it, but other people at Theory Underground are welcome. This is something that is made available to the subscribers, and we're hopefully going to add Polish and Chinese soon. I'm prioritizing these languages not just because I'm part Polish or whatever. No, it's because we've had special support from people in Poland for the work that is happening at Theory Underground. And one of our students from the Critical Media Theory cohort, as well as the other monthly cohort, the Critical Doxology and Timenergy one, Vukac, is actually working on translating Timenergy, as is we have two other students who are also working on translating this into Chinese and German. So, I wanted to actually just take a second here to acknowledge their work. Good job, guys. For real, thank you so much. It's amazing that this is happening. I did not imagine that we would have translations of this book coming out as fast as they are. But give it up to Vukac, to Sue, and to Rudy for taking on this project. And it just makes me want to learn Chinese. It makes me want to learn Polish. It makes me, on top of the other ones. And I don't know how deep I'll go with any of these different languages. I suspect German and French are the ones I have to go deepest into for philosophical reasons. And so that's why we're really excited to be working with you on French.
Well, on your thing about just getting together and making strange noises, before I came to France, I did a 6-month course in teaching English as a foreign language. And part of that was getting us to be in the student position and to learn languages that we didn't know. And the most amazing one that I sat in on, I wouldn't be able to apply it. It's called The Silent Way. And the guy decided to teach us a sentence in Chinese. And he just had some, those Cuisenaire rods. The little one is white. The 2-unit one is red, and the 3 to 1 is green, and so on.
Uh-oh. Is he breaking up for you as well there?
Yeah, we're effing.
Okay.
Can you hear me better?
You're back now.
No?
Okay.
He took one rod and he just got us to make noises. And when we made a noise that was in the sentence, he would just sort of make a sign. So he didn't say anything. And after 20 minutes, he got us to produce a sentence, which I've modified over the years, but it was in 1979. And I remember that sentence even today. The sentence was, "Itiao kao fei mutiao," something like that. And it meant, put the rod back in the box. And he didn't give us any context, any help, any introduction. It was just everybody making sounds, hoping that he would accept one of them, and building up from that. And not only did it work, well, it was very slow, but it imprinted itself far more than since then. I've learned with different methods. With my kids, I learned Japanese a little. I can't remember any of that, and that's a lot more recent. That's only 20 or less, 15 years ago. And this thing from 44 years ago imprinted itself on my brain just by this sort of making random noises and sort of behaviorist conditioning, but with meaning added. So I think that's a quite interesting experiment to try out. So I don't know. Maybe if you can find somebody who knows the silent way, it would be a brilliant experiment.
Wonderful. I guess I want to give you the floor here to say any closing thoughts, anything that's left on your mind, or anything you want to share with the listeners about your own work, your own blog, your YouTube, or thoughts about anything that we've talked about here.
Nothing really stands out. I think just getting excited about stuff and going into it intensely. I was thinking about your statement about the 12-hour-long streams. I think that's good for getting into the world or the universe of the thinker that you're approaching. I mean, it's not an exact comparison, but when I was sitting in on Deleuze seminars on the cinema for 4 years. I was in Paris, and it was the perfect place. I didn't have much cinematic culture, and it seemed like every week there was a festival around all the works of one famous film director. So I remember going to, and lots of them were virtually all day and all night. So I remember, because some of the works were really long. I remember Cyberberg and Tarkovsky in particular, and I think Alain René. And I would go, and I would begin maybe early afternoon and finish at 4 o'clock in the morning, and repeat that several days. And that was amazing, and it sort of just upped my cinematic culture and understanding of what Deleuze was talking about in his seminars. There's a moment when you're not going to get anywhere if you don't sort of it's to immerse yourself. It's the theory of immersion, which is both false and true. I mean, for language learning, immersion is absolutely necessary, but it's nowhere near enough. If you don't have
Okay, I hope what happens is what happened last time. We're kind of fast forwards.
There we go.
Okay, you're back. You cut out for a second there. Sorry about that. Yeah.
So I think your process of sort of 2-hour, let's say, or whatever, variable hour sessions, that's giving people the rigorous grammar of the language for the world you're trying to get them to enter into, and the long streams are the immersion process that works for language and it works for thinking as well. So I think it's good that you've got both.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for coming, Terence. It's been an absolute pleasure. It's an honor. And I'm so glad we finally got a chance to meet you and introduce you to everybody.
Yes, I'm looking forward to doing more. Fucking my brain up more.
Yeah. Take care.
Okay, thanks. Bye. Bye.
We cannot do direct revolution, but the only way to lay the foundation for it is to do what you are doing to move the underground. It's a theoretically correct title.
Welcome to Theory Underground, a place for workers with earbuds who are tired of the bullshit and just want to get down to it. Big ideas, rigorous thinking, and ultimately liberation from necessity.
Research at Theory Underground focuses on what is most important for understanding our current situation. Theory of the subject, capital, time-energy theory, critical media theory, CMT, and the most essential critiques necessary for understanding why the theory, ideology, and common sense of influencers left to right misses the mark.
Theory Underground is coming to a city near you. Besides a commitment to publishing certain underground theorists and popularizing certain fundamental concepts, we have toured the United States and are touring Europe to promote our ideas, courses, and publications. You've been reading Underground Theory.
Amazing book. I'm a publisher and an editor. I run and review books. Literally, it's my living. This is the best edited collection I've ever read.
Okay, picture this scene. America, early 2021. An Amazon warehouse worker arises from the emerging underground theory internet scene to create spaces for untimely topics and concerns that are too often neglected or kept in isolation today. Joined by a revolving cast of underground theorists, academics, and critics, he establishes what will become Theory Underground, a teaching, research, and publishing platform by and for working-class intellectuals, autodidacts, and academics who want to do more than they're able to do within the confines of academia. That warehouse worker's name is David McKerracher, and his book Timenergy is his first major contribution to the world of theory. It was recently reprinted with a foreword by none other than Slavoj Žižek, who also contributed to Theory Underground's latest book.
My Bible, it's an excellent book.
A collection of essays called Underground Theory.
What you just heard is an excerpt from the Strange Exiles podcast, episode 23, where Bram from Strange Exiles interviewed me and Mikey. For those who don't know, Mikey is the author of the Dangerous Maybe blog. We are publishing one of his books here shortly at Theory Underground. He's also a lecturer at Theory Underground, and he's someone I've been friends and a collaborator with for over 10 years. But most importantly for you all, he's a fantastic lecturer, and it's a crime that he has to do wage labor right now. One of the long-term goals of Theory Underground has been now for a couple of years to hashtag free Mikey. That is something that I've been really pushing, but first, obviously, I have to get freed myself, so the two of us are able to do this because, as Mikey said, build it and they will come. Well, I tried and I built a website and platform. I had my own app and everything, but it's been really buggy and it's more than one person can handle, and that's, a really good lesson for me. And so for now, what we're doing is moving it to a temporary intermediary platform until we are able to get some more serious funding. And ultimately, we want to be in a place like this, a real brick and mortar digital nomadic mecca where people can come from all over the world. But also, the app was really expensive, and so by quitting it, I am now able to save a lot of money, and with the help of my patrons and the students at Theory Underground, especially the monthly subscribers, I am officially able to quit Amazon and do Theory Underground full time. So thank you so much, everybody. This is one huge step forward. My way of giving back to everybody is by promoting everyone who is at a current tier to the benefits of the tier above them as far as subscribers go, and also rolling out a new lower tier. And so check out the tier subscription setup. And if you're not interested in taking the courses or what's being offered for subscribers and you want to support anyway, check out the Patreon. Finally, just stay tuned for more information on the tour in Europe during the month of May 2024 and the conference in Mexico during the last weekend of October 2024. If you want to be there, hit me up ASAP. Let's get talking, because it's happening very soon. All right, bye-bye. Special shout out to Nikolai, Sahil, and Zatsandra, as well as all of my other amazing patrons over at patreon.com.